Why don't we go ahead and get started? And this is the time for the collaborative juvenile court stakeholder convening that we've been doing. I know everybody's been doing some work. I'm going to give some updates on what's happening here with our court and the number of things we've been able to accomplish, and let other folks know what's going on, and then a couple of updates based on the agenda that I sent out. So I'm planning to follow that. Let me just start with saying, Judge Starring, is there anything you want to say? You can just shake your head, however you want to do it. You're muted still, I think. I can't hear you at least. Oh, can you hear him, Judge Young? Okay. This is a tech problem in the room, but I believe I can fix it. Try it now, Judge Starring.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I don't have anything dramatic to report. We do have one case that seems to be raising the issues down here. I am not familiar with all the details, but our clerk's office, Lisa Howell, and that panel and our chief staff attorney are addressing that. But as of now, it's just one.
Judge Young, anything you wanted to add at this point? And I'll give an update on Division 1.
I don't have anything. Thank you, though.
So since September of 2024, when we put the AO in place, that's the 2024-08, we've stated a total of 105 appeals. At this point, we've now been able to lift the stay in 71 of those cases. So we are making great progress. I appreciate that. I know everyone wanted us to be able to do it the next day, but we're getting there. We have 34 stayed based on that. 20 of those are from Maricopa County. The others are from other parts of Division 1. We have 2 pending lift stay cases, which will get resolved fairly quickly here. I know that DCS continued to move for some stays. We had 4 stay requests in January from our calculation. We've had 1 in February. We knew that was going to happen, and we knew those numbers would die out, and that seems to be consistent with what's going on. I know Judge Bustamante continues to manage about 20 cases. Had a status conference yesterday, and she has a status conference coming up on 2025. But between all of the work I know that Maricopa County and Judge Bustamante have done to get those cases moving, I think we've made a lot of good progress. So I'm pleased with that. I do want to make sure that we stay on top of it, so that's why we're going to continue. We did last time set up the things so that we could give you our list, and we could make sure. So I think everybody's hopefully gotten on top of those, and we aren't having some of the leakage that we had where people weren't getting notice, they didn't know what case had happened, and we're hoping to avoid that. The one thing that I would say about that is folks will notice that our orders are starting when we're lifting stays and our panels, depending on the situation, are setting. We're going to give the parties 20 days or whatever to try and to file some sort of supplemental in case there's anything related to the disclosure issue. That way we know we don't get pushes for reconsideration later or anything like that. So you'll see that if nobody files anything, it's an invitation to file. It's not if you must file. If we don't get anything, we move forward. I'm just going to turn around for a second, Patrick. Does that summarize how we're in? I just want to make sure there's nothing hiding.
We had a few more motions today for new states, 2 or 3 this morning.
Okay, so
also I think 2 for 2 more of the states.
Okay. So for today, we've had several requests for stay, and we've had several new requests to lift the stays. It's a pretty active practice right now. Patrick is, and I know it is much more active for you folks, but we are keeping those moving as quickly as we can to make sure that the process keeps working. So that's where we're at. I'm hoping that and we're going to talk a little bit more about some other things on the expedited review and other little things like that for dependencies, but that's a later issue, not on topic, but something of relevance because of what's happened with the GK case. So let me start, and I know first, congratulations to Mr. Pack, who is now Director of PAC. Lots of new work, and I should have changed that. I know I still called you General Counsel, and in the agenda. So Patrick, let's make sure I'm the one who did it. So, but if you could make note, then maybe I won't forget next time. I apologize for that. So, Mr. Pack, I know you have things that were going on. I suspect you're still. So you asked if you could go first. So why don't we go ahead and hear from you first, and then we'll try to keep moving.
Yeah, so I think you summarized it well. So do I need this?
Yeah, I'm not going to ask you to do that because sometimes people are having trouble hearing. We don't have any members of the public.
If you give me a mic like this,
Hey,
I have to do a tell show tune or something.
We can do a song and dance. I'm up for it.
If we're out of time. Okay, so I think you summarized it well. The original chunk, as far as I'm concerned, is done. We have submitted that. I don't know if it's to the court, but from our perspective, it's done. As we're getting these kind of like 4 or 5, whatever, coming in, the volume is low enough, we can handle this a lot quicker. So part of the problem was the volume, the sheer volume of it. I did want to say we've gotten approval, and I've talked about this before, for CRCU to hire some temps so they can staff up and down, just looking at the workload. But we're still having conversations about now. So over the past month, I've been in the field offices with the supervisors. And so some of the outerlying counties are saying, well, are we getting more case days? Are we, because we're bumping up CRCU, but the ones that don't use CRCU are now saying, like, we're spending a lot of our case management time doing the disclosure or redaction or whatever. So we're going to look at staffing as far as that goes. But I don't think they're behind yet, but they're spending a lot of their time on it. And so we want them doing other things. So that's just something that we're keeping an eye on. I'm sure Stephen will have a million more updates than I do because he has the IT piece. But from the legal side, that's what we're looking at.
Okay. And I know Stephen, you'll be talking about all of the different parts of the review and things, which is pressing part. When you say for the CRCU, are you starting to see some leveling off that you can at least predictably know what level of staffing you need? Now that we've through that?
Not yet.
Okay.
It's still looking high, but we're keeping an eye on it. So, I mean, that is at some point it will start to go down. But they are disclosing a lot more stuff.
I know,
Sounds good.
It's
Yeah.
going to go up and stay up at
Yeah.
some level because there's just additional stuff. Okay. Did you have anything you wanted to ask or questions? And anything on point because I do want to let Ms. Bitak get back to the other thing. You have an hour. Okay, good. And I don't think we'll be that long because I think we really are making progress, which is why we're here. So,
so I think your numbers are pretty accurate within a couple of cases. Ms. Gallagher is always here to answer the specifics. She keeps the best Excel spreadsheets anyone I've ever known. So we rely on
I
her.
don't know. This may be a throwdown. I'm pretty proud of Patrick's.
All right. She is on top. So we are starting to see the cases where the affidavits and our vowels are there. So we are not having to go back and look at the review. I did want to bring up at the Committee on Juvenile Courts, Judge Sama asked us the question, what are we doing to prevent something like this happening in the future? And so we made some changes internally to make sure that we have systems in place to prevent this from our end. But I just wanted to let you know, we are looking at that sort of from a systemic, idea. We've been triaging for almost 2 years now, just trying to make sure we get everything ready here. But we are looking at what the future looks like and what we need to do to make sure that we have systems in place, both from our end and the department's end, that we continue in this track and that we don't get ourselves back into a situation where there's an issue.
which, again, I come back to, and I didn't start this meeting this way, which is, how can folks hear me with the microphone and everything? All right, so as long as folks can hear me. I do commend folks that I know this was a rough start and it was not easy, but this was a change that needed to happen, and I appreciate the folks worked very hard to make sure that it happened. I think it would be hard to backslide, but I think we need to be careful, and it's not the first time the court has had to deal with things like this. We've had it with some employment benefit appeals, but we still have an OSC in place. But are hoping to be able to lift that, and part of that is looking at OSC and saying, what are the things in place to make sure it doesn't happen? Sure. So I think, as we wrap up this and knock on wood, I'm closing that OSC case here over the next few months, when we have all these gone, I'm not going to do it till that ends, that'll be something that we'll want to talk about, so we come to and I think now, again, what we're doing is part of how we get here, because now we know what documents they have. So I appreciate that. That's why I really do appreciate the systems in place to make sure that happens. So we can bring it up.
And I want to say the lion's share of that is coming from Stephen IT, because that's Director Protective. We want the field in the field, working with families and children and doing the social work piece, not spending vast majority of the time doing the disclosure. So I think as the technology improves, that is the best system that we can have in place.
Which is why I suspect looking at the other depths and saying, is there a better use and can we get this done? I think that makes perfect sense, because the social workers are there to do something and they're not disclosure. So that's part of where the challenge arose. And so Stephen, who I'm assuming is getting a Dundee Award at some time. Not, maybe we can come up with a Dundee Award or a real one, not making fun of Stephen for the work you're doing. I think let's make this all function.
I get really awkward with recognition, so if nothing comes, that's fine.
Oh, Dundee is perfectly good.
That might be, that might be the
Yes,
acceptable
office.
amount for
For
my own thing.
So, tell me where things stand, one, how it's gone now since, and then there are obviously the next steps that we've been talking about, which is probably where we're headed.
Sure. So we've just an update on how it's currently working with the disclosure application. There's been over 10,000 packets that have been created so far since it went live. Roughly every day there's 3,500 notes that are in the system that are replicated down. Roughly 3,300 person records associated with that. So it's been about 1 million data points that have been handled so far by the system this year, and it's functioning still well.
So I was going to say, and I want folks to think about that. It's pretty amazing. And part of what it shows is how much exposure is needed in terms of just that you come up with something.
Yeah, and we did have some initial bugs. All of the known bugs are resolved. So now it's really just monitoring performance to make sure that we have something that we can continue with, fine tune, and hopefully make that a little bit better. On the DCS specialist user experience side, we track something called the Net Promoter Score, which is done in software generally about how would you like this tool in some other work environment. You see it on websites when you log in. Would you recommend this to a friend? Right.
You take this survey.
Exactly, yes. So last year when we started this, it was at a -77, which is very bad. And we're up 66 points. So that's a very large shift in user experience. It's not where we want to end up, but it's a good start. We are working on the email proof of concept right now to make sure that we can gather all of the various requirements that are needed for that to start testing the email integrations with the system, which will just plug right into this disclosure. Still on target before summer to have that done. So that's the current state of the app itself. There's one conversation that we had towards the end of this month with the administrative leaders in the field around the performance management, because to your point of how do we prevent it from not happening again, we know we need to have a measurement system that makes sense. And when you're talking about this volume of data being created and the volume changing, just a straight percentage of things disclosed is not going to make sense. Because today you'll have 50, tomorrow you can have 70%, the following day you can have 30%, just depending on how hard your people are working those things. So we have a conversation with those leaders at the end of this month to start talking about how do we scale it up in a way that gives you a report of exceptions, things that need to be disclosed that have not been disclosed yet, where you have a manageable volume to handle. So similar to how we do AFCAR's reporting as an agency, we don't give our individual leaders the percentage of AFCAR's elements that the feds would like. We give them an error report to clean up and a timeline to clean up. So that's a trajectory that we're going into the measurement system. That'll be a little bit easier to manage that from a performance and process perspective.
So I understand it, and I'm not, not all the details, but is the report go to the supervisor, report with each tech with, or tech? Each caseworker will get the exception report. Give us that that's been sitting here for a while and think about it. That kind of thing.
So yes, part of it would be that, and then some with our tools now would be able to give what I'm calling it like the hopper for disclosure for specialists, so they can log into their hopper and see what the things they need to do. So we want to tailor it to the field specialist, so it gets to the person that needs to do the action first, and they can easily do that. And then administratively, the members they need to spot anything that starts creeping out of the norms, so they can address it as a one-off sort of thing.
Okay. And that way, and so I track the supervisor would get it and say, this person's behind in all these cases, something's going on, and know to get on. So it works in all the different, it has the potential to work in all the different.
Correct.
Because they're doing it and it's not something else.
Yes.
Well, and if I could
Sure.
for a second. So we practice the Arizona management system at DCS, and every section has a huddle board, and they use the huddle board meeting where they look at data. So like how many child contacts have been done, how many parent contacts have been done, all that kind of stuff. And this could be something that they could potentially write, which is like add to the weekly conversation of, oh, we're seeing our numbers creep up, what's happening, why are in that.
And that is what I do here, saying I see this creeping up, I see this going down. Why is there something going on? So it makes perfect sense.
And do you need resources or how do we?
So that's the measurement side. I have one.
Well, let me ask about the text messages on your messages. Always the tricky question.
Yes. So we still have a vendor that we're vetting out. There's a question that we have to look at in relation to the budget. So that's always I'm not anticipating the budget to be resolved in the next month or so. So that
That's good bad.
you know, if anyone wants to take the bet on the other side of that, I would happily make so a lot of it is we have an idea of the software we want to use, but we want to see can we actually afford that. So we got to wait for that process to go through. Any others before?
And then nothing else on that, then how is the review? Council and making sure that we have these are the things we're going to be disclosing and it's comfortable with the file.
Yes, so, there's 2 meetings that we've been having. So post go live with the application, we've been having once a week a touch point on just more organizational change management for the folks receiving these new formatted records. We did those through the month of January. We continue to receive the same feedback that it's jarring, like it's hard for folks to start getting used to that format. But then by the end of the month, we didn't have much participation in those phone calls. So we've ended that series of phone calls of the initial feedback. I think that feedback's kind of set in stone. So then we've continued to have the meetings on the table. So we have 1,201 of them reviewed, 893 left, the 2 reviewed.
So a little over halfway, maybe 2/3, but not right there. One of the things, and as we talked about, how do we wrap this up and how do we make sure this doesn't happen? And it's to think about, maybe you've already thought about it, you can answer the question, but how do we make sure that as we go down the road, there's this new set of documents that we make sure everybody knows they've been created so that the disclosure happens. And I think that's what you're thinking about as part of this, because You know, there may be, I'm certain there are things we have today that weren't there 20 years ago.
Yes.
And it's going to continue to happen, and I think that's where the slippage is. So I think folks are gonna have to, and it's gonna be on both sides, not be aggressive, but at least assertive. We're gonna do an annual review. These are the things that have come up over the past year, right? And these kind of things. If we don't do that, if that discussion is happening,
Yeah.
then I think we'll end up in the same place in 30 years, just because the world have changed how it does things.
Absolutely. So for the way that our software development life cycle works, we plan it in quarters, and we follow a safe agile framework. So in that process, as our business analysts are gathering requirements, this will become part of that standard process to say, we've got a pretty good set of stakeholders now that are involved in this conversation. So if we're creating something new in the system, then do we have the right folks involved to make those determinations for instance, disposable material or not? A lot of that does depend on where we end all of this work on what gets like finalized there, but that's where my head is at there, because we need to integrate both the question about disposable material and just some other things generally like privacy laws and other security rules and things like that. So that will be part of our standard process for improvements in the system going forward.
I think that I kind of bring that up because I think that's part of being vigilant is the loyal opposition, whatever you want to call it, to make sure that the questions are being asked and we don't just forget. Both sides need to be engaged in that and be thinking about it, or just talking. It'll become that evil ring that takes over everything. So, all right, thank you. Anything that folks have for Stephen, do you have any questions about? How are things going on the other side? It sounds like the formatting was jarring and not perfect. But everybody, it's like most things people get used to and start seeing to figure out what to do with it. Probably still area to work on, but is that sort of calmed down and then other things?
Yeah, generally I think that people are feeling a bit of the pinch in terms of review because especially as you get some of these data points or spreadsheets that are in, they can be a little hard to decipher. Case notes are generally pretty easy, even if they generate a lot of miscellaneous information you don't need, but the other documents that might be included at the same time are a little hard to parse. I think there is a growing awareness and a discussion on our side about what we're going to do once we start releasing, the 1,000 something data points on a more regular basis. DCS to this part, and that'll be our discussion in our office, how we're going to handle that and review that and, responsibly do that. I think it's a discussion that we're having. I do know some of the offices are feeling the pinch, and that's generally because not everyone's uniform. I'm with the Office of the Public Advocate. We have secretaries who are dedicated to assist us with disclosure. Office of Legal Defender does not have that. So that's a burden that falls on their attorneys. The attorneys are definitely feeling like there's a lot more coming out now. This is a lot more admin work that we weren't used to. And so again, just as we see with these new processes, it is, increasing admin work and again, just larger discussions for events to have on, how we're allocating that. I do think that.
In other words, sometimes you got to be careful what you ask for. And now you have to do, but it was an important thing. So I imagine it has to be a shift on your side because there is a lot more disclosure.
And I agree, and I think as you've identified, we've had cases where we've been filing motions to set aside. So, as a defense part, we feel these documents would have been important to us at the representation. Our clients would have been important to have at trial. So it didn't need to be done. We're just working out the kinks along to get there. With the review of cases, I think it's going very well. We're getting down there. The only thing that I do kind of see on the horizon, which I guess we're kind of at the mercy of the transcriptionist office, the reporter's office right now, we've had a little over a year without many appeals going through, and now they're all clear that as soon as those transcripts are issued and the record is complete, 20 days. This month I had 4 come due, which is in my office. It's me and a secretary. It's a lot of hustle. It's doable, but I'm sitting there saying there's 10 or 11 that they could say are due next month. I don't know how the other offices or contract counsel are looking with their own at that. It's just, a heads up with maybe making a little bit more unique request for extension just because this is a bit of a unique time.
And I understand, and we're facing the same thing, getting cases assigned to panels and trying to move them on. What I would suggest is make sure that you have whatever motions you file, explain what the situation is, how many are going on, so that we can try and have a good handle, because we also don't want to turn around and just be extending them randomly and stuff. But I'm not surprised that that's the case. And we certainly warned our judges that we're going to have a glut of JV inflows that are going to hit, but we're going to want to move them as quickly as possible. But they need to be properly moved. So one thing to keep in mind, again, is that supplemental briefing order that I mentioned, are issuing that now consistently. You may not have issued it, but that's something that comes up. We're trying to figure out, this is just something that's really the case. So make that request.
And I will spread that information. I have a few of them where I filed appeals, and we'll just be doing a motion to consolidate those since we've already had the supplemental briefing schedule set. I was like, well, that's all we really need, so we can just consolidate that appeal in and consolidate together. So generally, I will say working with fellow counsel from the Attorney General's office is a very collaborative effort. We're just trying to make sure that we're addressing this and nothing's getting dropped in the cracks. So it is going on.
And nobody's, and we're working on it, Patrick. Just aware. So again, the more information you give in the motion, the faster we can get them resolved. I have a fast pace back and forth on getting it. So
I've noticed and I appreciate that. Getting answers to some of those motions definitely eases workload and concern. So it is much appreciated.
all right. So as far as moving forward, how long do you folks, this two of you, Stephen, think that you need on the 800 and some 900 across the properties left? Because now you have a sense of how many you cover.
That's pretty, I'm surprised at how quickly, would you agree, Seth? Like, we get through them pretty quickly.
We do.
There might be hang-ups on a few here or there, but yeah.
Yeah, it somewhat depends on the participants because, if you get defense bar from all over the state who are invited and, you have stakeholders from all over. And so, trying to accomplish any great amount of stuff with 16 stakeholders from wildly different practices, you get different questions.
Sure.
And some people have asked to go back and revisit some of the options, which is fine. And we've done that just because I think people have had some ideas or thought about it as they mulled it over. And so I think that has been some of our initial was very quick and brisk, and then we've had a little bit of slowdown, and some of that is especially as more stakeholders come, they say, I would like to revisit this, which we are accommodating. So, but I would say we're over halfway there, and it's only been, maybe 5-6 meetings at this point, so pretty quick, I imagine it would ramp up, or should close up, especially because I think they've already knocked out all the ones that are developer-only tables at this point. And for the most part, everything, it's not much of a discussion. It's mostly just trying to figure out what something is, because most everything is relevant unless it's either confidential or not case specific, which is, really the big discussion of trying to.
That's if we're trying to cover for meeting.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. If we have kind of, if we go, okay, April would be our goal, so we can ramp that up. And like I said, what I'm hoping to start to see is a timeline for the ramp up at this point. When, and for example, it may be June until we know what the budget looks like, but we'll have a better sense of that. In terms of the just thinking if there was anything else there's something that was positive that I'm drawing a complete blank on. So I'm wondering how important it was. I know you all are. Sorry about that.
If it was voicemails, that's also part of that thing.
Yeah. Oh, yes, voicemails. And hopefully by then we'll have a better sense. That's what I was processing. A better sense of where we're headed and what we're going to do with that. I know for most people, getting that text message back online as much as possible. It just needs to be done. All right. So now, anything else that we should set as an agenda item for next time. That we need to work on with. Yes. I'm going to, those are both on my list, slightly different topics.
I think we're continuing with the revisions. Like,
So on a related note that, and before I go into dependencies, we worked out that the attorneys are getting the materials. What is happening with self-representatives? Because they're not as common, but there are some people who have opted to represent themselves in these cases. How are they getting that disclosure? And how is it working? One, in the cases that are pending now versus the ones that have already passed. Do we address the self-representation under Congress?
We're sending. And there could sometimes be a delay because I may not realize that they were self-represented, but our appeals team and our litigation team usually read that, and so then we end up sending them directly.
Okay. And so then, in cases that are live as opposed to on appeal, how is that working? Because I don't, especially in Maricopa County, where the disclosure is done very differently, I'm just making sure that everybody gets the access to it.
They have access.
They have it, yeah.
Parents all have access to it.
So they have it.
In Maricopa County, parents have access, Jack, so they can log in themselves and they can pull that information out
Okay.
themselves. In the outer line county, I would imagine the managers making sure that they receive that, and GG would be following up to make sure they have everything.
Okay. There's one thing, because I just was thinking about it, one on the appeal side, and there are fewer, but there are, as I've been working on all my self-representation materials, 40 to 45% of our cases involve at least one self-representing litigant, not necessarily in juvenile, but across the board, it's a very high number. And there are certain that are in juvenile, so I don't want to have them get lost in that. So that's good to know, and I wanted to make sure. So if there's a self-represented litigant who's having trouble, whereas question as to whether their case was affected, reach out to.
They can reach out to the Attorney General's office, okay, we'll definitely direct them.
So anybody with that problem should reach out and see, is there something, and then again, just making sure. One other thing that came up that I wanted to mention, because we talked about it briefly, it has to do with the PSW cases, in particular dependencies. We had talked earlier about the GK case that went up to the Supreme Court. It was pending for a petition for review, in which this court ruled that after the Superior Court meets again and holds another hearing and again reaffirms, however you want to call it, but keeps the dependency in place, that moots the appeal for the earlier dependency because it has to be based on the information and the evidence available at the time of the hearing. That means we're in a bit of a race. Does the Superior Court meet before we get the appeal done? If it does, then we're out of time. So what we did is set up a special process to handle that. It's important now because the Supreme Court did deny review in GK, so that case stands as the law. And so all dependencies under that case, now a different panel could disagree, but the Supreme Court turned down the review, so at least at this point, that's where it stands. We need to handle this quickly. So we have that process where Patrick is reviewing any case in which dependency only is appealed, looking at whether it can be handled either as a special action or as an accelerated appeal. One of the things we clarified is that even if it's treated as a special action, that Rule 607 applies, and the parent could file their own appeal notice or petition, brief. I'll get there. I feel like my grandmother trying to name things. File their own brief if their attorney says, I haven't found anything. So we want to make it clear, even if we switch it to a special action, that is still available to the parents to file on their own. But just highlight that that order remains in place and is, again, I think more important now than it was before to making sure we can. So we'll continue to do that. Whether at some point we need a rule change to deal with that, I don't know. The AL is working just fine for the moment. But I wanted to point that out. So when do we want to get together again? And I guess what I'm thinking is it's mid-April or mid-February. If we looked at mid-April, we should be close to wrapping up. I'm trying not to have you folks come back, but I want to keep it on. We'll maybe have a sense of at least what's going on with the budget, what's happening. And what I'm hoping is we'll be pretty much down to very few cases, if any, still pending in the state status. And if any other issues have come up, that would work. Does that work for folks? All right. So Lena needs to check the calendar for a date. If folks want to look at their calendar, I'll look at mine and see where things stand right now. Tuesday afternoon still kind of the better day for everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. Does that work for you, Judge Starring and Judge
Works for me.
Works for me.
Okay. So calendar-wise, I'm thinking maybe use, because the 15th is not a Monday. What if we use the 22nd? See if you do. You're kind of an important part of this. And we all know it, even if your humility does not allow you to accept the kindness. What about the 29th? That'll be the end of the month, and maybe we'll be able to say it is wrapped up. All right, I'm seeing thumbs up from everybody else. You folks have votes. Judge Young? All right, and Judge Starring, I don't know. I can't see you. There you are. That work, thumbs up? All right. All right. I'm going to assume that we're going to be in this room again because it seems to work. And if it's not available, we'll update the room. Yeah. So, all right. I, again, commend everybody and wish everybody a happy Statehood Day. That's coming up on Friday. There is an event at the Capitol if folks want to go over and at least celebrate our statehood in addition to Valentine's Day. But thank you, folks. I really do appreciate the hard work and everything folks do. We're getting. Thank you. It doesn't work with quickly. One thing we were talking about doing is if fewer people from the public show up, we may just use that half of the conference room. We'll sit at the table. There'll be chairs over there for the public and everything, but we'll just have it set up. Although they're just use a smaller room. Plus, it makes it easier for everyone.
Any chance of a parent being able to sit at the table or somebody that represents parents, somebody that's in the trenches?
Generally, no, because that's not what we're trying to do. I understand what you're talking about, but we're not like a real committee. That's kind
it's so one-sided here.
Seth and Judge Foster, who are normally here, they're parent representation.
She's talking about like self-representing, somebody for the self-representing.
I'm talking about being in the trenches and knowing what the parents are going through and the kids and addressing things that have not been addressed here at all.
And that's why I say this is a limited thing. We're only really looking at how the disclosure works. So if the parent said, look, here's where I'm having a problem with the disclosure, I would absolutely hear that, not from a whole bunch of people, but let's talk about what that is. But the other issues, it's just not, that's really for the juvenile committee to talk with them about. Because we're just really focused on this one thing in the LSC. I got to get this disclosure. So if that helps understand how I have to do that.
I get what you're saying. But there's disclosure issues that have not been addressed here. And, for example, all the cases where the children were taken with no disclosure, that's that's unlawful. You know, like Judge Welty stated, DCS has been forcing his judges to ignore the laws.
Well,
So where does that go?
I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth on that, but what I will say is that's, again, that is beyond what we're doing here, because that is, do those parents decide there's someone who will actually one, two, three?
Sure.
And I don't have an answer, and I couldn't answer that question here, even if we discussed it.
Right.
I think that's really something that they need to talk and probably talk
With the civil rights attorney.
not trying to put it off, but that's talking about what
Sure.
do we do about the past. I'm trying to deal with what do we do, one, about the present cases and cases.
Right.
So I just
But-
can't do the backwards.
But the thing is, what hasn't been addressed for years has affected parents, children. It's not like you're seizing cars out of a driveway. So what is moving ahead to help these parents and children that have been wronged for all these years?
That's why I say to the extent they were wronged, I'm not going to try and say that. I'm just going to say to the extent. That's something that they need to look at how they would deal with it, because I can't correct it. I can't go back and undo all that.
Right.
That's why I can work with the president. I can work with the appeals that are active in front of me. I can work with the disclosure that can happen. The backward look is something they need to figure out, whether there's something they should or could do. Because I can't do it on my own. I can't reopen all the appeals that have gone to this court.
Right. Yeah, I get it.
So that's, so unfortunately, it's just not the right place, but I would say, it's certainly something, and that's why we're talking about how do we make sure this never happens again? Annual reviews, regular reviews to ensure that the disclosure never falls into this place again. But I can't,
Right.
I just can't do that for the people who have something.
Well, and the other question is that, the old CEO, Frank Sweeney, he's this computer programming guru. Where has he been through this whole process?
No idea.
Right? I mean, he was, he's been to what?
He's the overall supervisor. He's been involved.
Yes. Yeah, he has been involved in this. That's been one of the
Okay.
So yeah, I gotta
Right.
save my life. And I got a pretty narrow one. But I think we're being
Yeah.
effective with what I can do.
I just think that parents and children need to be more acknowledged here.
The one thing I will say,
Instead of all the hard work for, DCS, when this is what they should have been doing in the first place, parents and children need to be recognized. And, even a simple apology might go a long way. But
again,
legally, I don't know if they can do that.
so one thing I will say is if there's an issue with regard to the disclosure that's coming out, to getting the disclosure, I'm not going to deal with the case, but a systemic problem. Oh, this isn't happening, right? That's something that I would want. So if there's something happening today, the disclosure is going out, but there's a glitch somewhere that is happening to self-representing parents. That's something, if there's a self-representing parent who says, here's what I can tell you is the issue. Not again deciding a case. But, there's, all of us have looked at this, and it keeps happening to all of us. That would be something I would suggest you reach out to this way, and Mr. Pat, and have that dialogue about what it is, to try and see what we can do.
If they'd be willing to do that, so would I. Okay.
So I think just because, again, we're trying to deal with the systemic issues and make sure it works. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're in this room,
1:30.
and this room And again, depending on how many people are here, we may just use half of it. So it's easier than we just sit around the conference. But they'll be shared.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
So it'll just be in the same.
Okay.
Thank you, folks.